2025, and it is Transportation for Vermonters Day and Lobbying Day. And we have a number of guests here, and I think you're going to lead off. You should give your name and where yours from.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Chair Westman and members of the committee for making time for us today. My name is Katie Gallagher. I coordinate the Transportation for Vermonters Coalition, and I'm also the Sustainable Communities Program Director for the Vermont Natural Resources Council, where I focus on land use planning and development. So transportation is a really significant part of that work. And my colleagues here, Sandy Thibault from CATMA and Jonathan Weber from Local Motion, are also going to be talking. So I'm just going to give a very kind of brief overview of who the coalition is, what our high-level policy priorities are for the 2025 session, and then I'll hand it over to Sandy and Jonathan to dig a little bit deeper, and then leave some time at the end for questions. So I know several of you are pretty familiar with the coalition already, but we are a broad group of organizations, institutions, businesses that are working to lift up transportation as a really critical part of Vermont's affordability crisis, of our climate crisis, of all of these different things that fortunately have a very common solution, which is providing more transportation options for Vermonters across the state, which we know is very difficult to do in a rural state. And so that is part of why the coalition formed in 2017. This is an overview of our members, but we also have about 20 non-advocacy affiliates who join our monthly meetings and participate in developing our policy priorities and informing our work. So they are not listed here, but we have a much kind of broader group that we also work with. And as I said, we are coming at this from multiple different perspectives. Transportation provides us with economic and social opportunities. Having more opportunities to walk and bike and be in more active transportation modes improves public health and safety. Having vehicles that aren't as polluting is really impactful for our water and air pollution. It helps to meet our sustainable smart growth land use goals by fostering walkable community centers, and helps us to meet our required carbon emission reduction goals. And it's not just us who are saying this, right? I'm sure that you have heard and will hear that there are many different studies that have been coming out, I think increasingly over the past couple of years, related to healthcare and to aging and food security and equity and affordability. These are just a couple that have really called out transportation as a critical investment that we need to meet or make in order to meet all of these different goals. So news to no one here, the status quo is not working for Vermonters or for our environment. But as I said, there are some common solutions that we are excited to talk to you about. So the first, not an easy one, but the biggest one, which is sustainable funding. Again, I know this is not news to anybody here, but transportation funding in general is having some challenges and will continue to have challenges. We are talking about funding for our transportation in general, but wanted to highlight this year in particular funding for transit, as we've been seeing Green Mountain Transit, our largest transit provider, cutting services already. And from our conversations with our rural transit providers across the state, they are kind of next on that fiscal cliff. So, just to reiterate, it's not just GMT. This is a statewide problem. And so there have been numerous studies looking both at transit funding, particularly, as well as more general transportation funding. So we hope that the legislature will take a deeper dive into those studies that have come out over the past couple of years to identify some more sustainable, dedicated sources of funding. The second priority that we wanted to talk about is related to the EV and e-bike incentive programs. These have been very successful in the state of Vermont. Vermont's e-bike incentive program was the first in the country. These two maps I pulled up are just showcasing how these are incentives that have been taken advantage of across the state, and have really been geared towards lower and moderate income Vermonters, and have proven to be a really effective way to increase transportation options for Vermonters. And unfortunately, an EPA grant was not received that we were banking on. So these programs lost funding in fall of last year. So we hope that ideally we would get some bridge funding in the Budget Adjustment Act, but longer term that these programs are sustained. And I just want to note that the inconsistency of these funding programs is a really big challenge for consumers and for our car dealers and our bike shops when they are trying to deal with programs that both have inconsistent funding levels and, in this case, a total loss of funding. So it's really difficult, especially just on the EV program, when you have folks who are trying to plan for a really significant cost and investment. This is really challenging. And look, Lamoille County really using those incentives, darker than Windsor County,
because they have the bike check. It's really a plus.
So the next priority is a mouthful. This is the revenue generating emissions reduction policy tool, which is our long way of saying cap and invest. This is the study that you requested coming out of last year to look at a policy tool that both reduces our greenhouse gas emissions while also raising the revenue to make sure that Vermonters can afford to have mobility options and access those mobility options. So we as a coalition are still taking into consideration what that report says, and don't have a specific position on exactly what that should look like, but do all agree that we both need to reduce our emissions, as transportation is the #1 source of our greenhouse gas emissions. And again, we need to do so in a way that is affordable and accessible for Vermonters. And then finally, improving street safety so that folks can actually walk and bike and roll on our roads. There's a lot to it here. We have pulled out what we think are relatively low-hanging fruit, low-cost options, especially for our smaller and more rural towns that don't have necessarily the capital to invest in larger bike ped infrastructure projects. So these are some options that, again, would make our streets safer to allow for people to have more options for getting where they need to go. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sandy.
I'm breaking here just a little. In the overall, in transportation, our revenue sources are all flat, except for purchase and use. Mm-hmm. And a third of our purchase and use, 52 million last year, went to the ed fund. And until we get revenue sources that are growing, you're going to see inconsistent programs across the board. Whether or not you have, from my vantage point, whether or not you have dedicated funds or whatever you create in it, as long as the T fund remains the place where we get revenue sources that don't grow with the economy. Mm-hmm. And our only source that grew was purchase and use and goes into the education fund. It becomes hard for us to maintain any of the good things that you're talking about that I think we all want to meet. So the underlying problem for me really becomes the ill health of the T fund overall. Mm-hmm. And it leads to decisions that we probably all don't want to make in the overall because we have to run to do that. And I would just in this, we can organize the deck chairs however we want, but until the T fund has a consistent, and I'm going to beat the horse just a second longer. If you're the general fund, what you have is income taxes. They're bracketed, that as people's incomes go up, the income tax goes up. In the ed fund, largest source is real estate. Well, what is the price of real estate done in this state in the last 5 years? And so you get this increase. We're stuck with everything that is either flat or declining. Fees don't go up. Gas taxes are going down because there's less gas, and it's a flat 23 cents anyways. And our only source that went up was on cars, and you take a third of it. And the policies that have been created and the spending levels that are created out of that single decision, I think affect all of the stuff that you'd like to see done. And I think we'd all like to see done. I just have to say.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think that's a lot of what we've been grappling with, and have been hopeful that the studies that have come out over the past couple of years speak to that a little bit. Just 2 points I'll make quickly. One is, I think that there are some new sources of revenue that we could be looking at within the T fund.
I'm right there with you. But we have to have stuff that's going to grow and be overall.
Right. Yeah. So my initial thought was things like we're not getting any revenue from EV drivers who are coming from out of state. That's a source of revenue, for example, that we're not like.
I'm right here with, but the thing that I would say to you is, maybe as we talk about the overall ed fund and that maybe some of that purchase and use tax could come back to the T fund, level up the playing field. So the T fund isn't the only place that our revenue sources are flat.
Right. And that was my other thought. And I'd be curious your all thoughts on this. One thing that we've been talking about as a coalition is trying to talk about transportation outside of the transportation committees and saying to, healthcare, human services, environment, if this is a priority for you, you also need to help with finding the revenue to, be lifting up these services.
If you're going to, at the Green Mountain Care Board, call for the downsizing of hospitals like Newport.
Right.
And you're going to be serious about that, then people have to get to doctor's appointments in other places.
Right.
And RCT is going to need help. But we can't do it with flat revenue sources. And I would just argue with anybody that thinks, well, if I had a dedicated source of my own, well, those little walls all come down because we not withstand stuff all the time because we're desperate to do the less and less of the basic stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry,
Yeah.
that was more. But
it's an important part of it.
I'm sorry to butt in, but you go ahead and go.
Yeah, thank you. Sandy.
We have some packets here with my presentation and CATMA collateral, if anyone is interested.
Yeah, that's the cat with the lateral down.
That's it for you when you get ready.
You hit its folders. Thank you, Sandy.
Keep it organized.
Do you have an Oh, I think they actually got this from Megan. She was kind enough to print them for us. This is just
Great. So thank you, senators, for this opportunity and all your work. My name is Sandy Tebow. I'm executive director of the Chittenden Area Transportation Management Association, another mouthful, also known as CATMA. Over the next 7-ish minutes, I'm going to provide a quick overview of CATMA, our work with employers, specifically in Chittenden County, the impact of our transportation demand management programs, and share some of what we're hearing from employers in Chittenden County around transportation. But first, a little bit about CATMA for those who are not familiar, really quick. We're a nonprofit that was formed in 1992 by Champlain College, the University of Vermont, and UVM Medical Center to jointly plan transportation and parking to better coordinate land use, reduce environmental impacts in single occupant vehicles. And we do that through a variety of TDM measures. I did want to mention that CATMA does not operate transit or shuttles or any modal service. We often sometimes get confused that we might be running the buses or shuttles. We do not. So just want to clarify that. In 2015, we expanded to a regional association in Chittenden County, which meant we moved from serving just the Hill institutions to opening up membership to businesses and developers in Chittenden County, who would be eligible to participate in our suite of TDM programs and services. And I'll talk about that network in a moment. Our mission, vision, and goals are all outlined here and in your packets. We really strive to improve our transportation network and working with businesses and developers and encourage collaboration and really a convener in Chittenden County around transportation. This is a good visual, gives you an idea of the reach that CATMA has in Chittenden County. So the top tier is CATMA members. These are dues paying members. So you'll see our 3 founding institutions. There's a number of employer members and a number of developer members. The developer, it's a combination of voluntary versus mandatory membership. In the case of the city of Burlington, that has a parking ordinance and TDM requirements. There's one of the TDM strategies they ask them to consider is joining a TMA, such as CATMA. The bottom portion here is our transportation coordinator network. So this is a network that is supported by the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission's annual work plan. We started this in 2015. There's about 90 plus, I think we're almost at 100 members, and it's businesses, developers, municipalities, transportation providers. And the goal of it was to engage more people into the conversation about transportation demand management, what the programs are, what transportation options are available in the county, the benefits of providing sustainable transportation options. These folks are not eligible for CATMA programs in our TC network, but they do receive bi-monthly newsletters from CATMA, and it's filled with a lot of transportation information, whether it's about GMT schedule changes or a public meeting or a corridor project or Winsky Bridge survey project. We try to keep them informed on what's happening in the county around transportation. So we really serve as a regional gateway connecting businesses, developers with transportation providers to work on transportation solutions. This here, I know you're probably all familiar with what TDM is, but wanted to provide a couple of formal definitions of what TDM is. This is TDM as a variety of strategies to inform and encourage commuters to use other modes of transportation to really optimize the system that is on the ground currently. And we do this through marketing, through incentives, through programs, services, data collection, and technology. The wheel you see here obviously is a variety of TDM modes, including telework, telecommuting. And then what is a TMA? So TMAs are a membership-based organization. They're usually a public-private partnership, and they form a formal agreement as an organization to work on providing and promoting transportation options to reduce congestion and better coordinate land use, and where they're able to build on parking lots in some cases. We are one of two TMAs in Vermont. There's the Upper Valley TMA through Vital Communities that serves the Dartmouth College, sort of New Hampshire area. And there's about 125 TMAs in the country, and they really come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Some operate shuttle, some simply do marketing and education. In Catma's case, we do a lot of everything. Next, I just have two slides. I wanted to share some impacts on Catma's TDM programs at our institutions and our dues paying members. So we conduct an annual employee and student transportation survey at the institutions and our employers, including students. And we surveyed this past year about 12,000 employees. We had about a 25% response rate for employees and about a 16% response rate for students. What you see here, just looking at like Drive Alone, compared 2023 to 2024, Drive Alone sort of was like a 1% decline in 2024. Off-campus students Drive Alone was down, went down 7%, which is interesting. And just keep in mind that the National American Community Survey in 2022, the Drive Alone rate was 68.7. So just kind of demonstrating, you know, the impact of Catma's coordinated programs. In regards to transit use here on this slide, employees use remain pretty consistent at about 4% based on those that answered the survey. Off-campus students, transit use was down a little bit from 2023, and on-campus students, you know, basically the same. What was interesting was walk bike for off-campus students was 42% in 2024, which is up from 35%. So sort of off-campus students doing more biking and walking. And on the right here, I just wanted to give you a snapshot of some of the top 5 routes that employees and students are using with Green Mountain Transit services.
What are the percentages there? On the routes?
And I'm sorry, the percentages are check all out apply. So the question that people receive is when you do take a bus, what route do you generally use? So yeah, so good question. Thank you. And then this is a question we added in this year to our survey is what factors prevent you from using the Green Mountain Transit bus system? And these were factors that GMT provided us, and we collaborated with them on this particular question. But you can see, you know, there's kind of a clear connection between employees and students on the top 5, you know, reasons that prevent them from using the bus. And not surprising is the timing doesn't work with their schedules. Routes are not connecting to desired locations or long travel times or service is too infrequent.
Are you okay to, so it's as more of a comment than a question, but in my experience, what happens, the timing does not work for my schedule. There's a lot that goes into that.
Mm-hmm.
And what has happened in my area and other areas that I'm familiar with is folks will be able to get to a place that works with their schedule, but then the returning trip isn't there. Like for example, the transit will stop at 5 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
and folks need to get home after that. So if you can't get home, you're not going to ride the bus. And I had some constituents who did try to do that and take the bike after. So we just need to look at that when we look at transit, because it could be that we'll get 2 trips if we have the service available later in the evening, because there aren't people going in the morning. So you get 2. It's a 2 for 1. So it's just, and then just amenities, bike shelters. I mean, shelters are obviously the best.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen just so many people standing in the rain, waiting for a bus. It's just not for the people driving by. too. It does not make it look attractive, as a way to get to wherever you're going.
Standing in the rain in
Yeah.
November is never good.
Right. So just having, providing dignity and just, logical, amenities is just really, really important. And that's something that I don't think we do enough. CAPMA helps with shelters
We
or at
do
least
not.
benches. We have a lot of places that don't even have a bench.
Yeah, I think the VPOC group has been setting up some benches in and around VPOC, Vermont, people
Vermonters.
oriented.
Vermonters for people oriented places.
Thank you.
Mm.
It's a new kind of grassroots organization based in Burlington, not specific to Burlington, but a lot of active members in that area that are starting to do kind of more policy work in addition to like guerrilla.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that online too, where someone will just go and just put a bench or a seat at a stop, and it shows you that we need it. So thank you for your work.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna wrap up here. I'm sharing here, we received oodles of comments from, in our survey, like hundreds from employees and students at our institutions and memberships. So just sharing a little flavor of what we're seeing, pretty consistent. I wanted to share, in CAPMA's work as I'm out there in the community talking to businesses, they're interested in promoting and using sustainable transportation options at their workplace, just do not have access to them. So I think there's UVM and Champlain College participate in the Unlimited Access Program. They contribute over $400,000 a year for an annual contribution. So I think employers are willing to invest and commit to it if they have the services. And some of the areas that there's a void is the Saxon Hill District and Essex, even Beta on Logic, Technology Park, and Shelburne, the Vermont Teddy Bear and Wade Robin facility, Husky and Milton, and I'm sure there's others, but that's just what I hear when I'm out in the community. And then, the housing challenges, the Let's Build Homes effort is just released. And I know VHFA released a nice employer housing guide, asking, and you're seeing more employers build housing, such as UVM and a medical center at Market Street in South Burlington. So, and then my last ask is that you save the date for CAPMA's fourth annual transportation summit. This is happening October 14th at the UVM Davis Center. I'll be sending you an invitation and hope that you can participate and attend. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sandy, so much for coming. I'm really appreciative of all the work that you do. I just want to comment on the TDM strategies piece. I remember we introduced a bill right before COVID, and the requirements had TDM requirements on all large scale employers. Anyone who had more than 500 employees had to have some kind of TDM plan. And what we heard with lobbyist after lobbyist was our business could never do telecommuting. Our business could never do alternative work schedules. That will cost us too much money. It's impossible. COVID happens. That same group of people almost overnight were able to completely transition some of their workforce to remote. And that has really stuck with me because I think it shows that there is a way to do a lot of this, but we unfortunately had to experience a global pandemic to be motivated enough to do it. So I do hope we can consider TDM strategies. And I'm wondering if you could comment on if large employers statewide should be required to participate in TDM programs like yours.
I think medium and large employers should be, I think all employers should, but really medium and large employers might have the resources and the ability, to implement a TDM program. And, whether that's working with CAPMA or the Upper Valley TMA or Go Vermont, there's the resources in the state to help them create a TDM program. And again, if the transit services and safe biking facilities or walking or carpooling, it depends what they have access to. So developing a TDM plan, with limited sustainable options available to them could be challenging. So it may be, employers that are located within a half a mile or so of a transit stop or bike facility. Is
Interesting.
my thought.
I like it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before I get started, I'll direct your attention to my boss.
Wow.
Right up.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to do a quick introduction. My name is Christina Erickson, and I'm the Executive Director of Local Motion. And I bring with me some small plastic and unfortunately made in China bike. But these come from the National Bike Summit, which I've attended now, and I'll attend again in Washington, D.C. And as part of what they call the bike partisan effort. So
cute.
bicycles can be for everyone. And whether it's an adaptive bicycle or an e-bike or your rusty 3-speed from your childhood home, they can be for everyone. So I share these with you, share them with friends if you wish, however you'd like. And simply just want to introduce Local Motion. Now in our 26th year of existence, we started back in 1999 with that bike ferry that many of you perhaps have had the opportunity to ride. And in 2012, we merged with the statewide Bicycle and Pedestrian Coalition. And so since 2012, we have been Vermont's statewide bicycle and pedestrian advocacy organization. And it is our mission to make it safe, accessible, fun, most importantly, well, may not, but for everyone to walk, bike, and roll in Vermont. And so with that, I'm going to transition to turn over to my colleague Jonathan to talk about more pieces that we hope to see for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Christina. Thank you all for having us here. I'm John Weber. I'm the programs director at Local Motion. So I get to work on a lot of the different things that we do, from educating kids in schools to bike and walk safely, to providing technical assistance to municipalities and local volunteers on committees at the municipal level who are working to improve their town's policy and infrastructure to allow more walking and biking to happen. So it's a job I am very thankful to get to do, and it gives me some perspective on the challenges and opportunities we're dealing with here in Vermont when it comes to walking and biking and transit. And I'll just mention, we talk about rolling here in the mission statement, and when we say rolling, we're really referring to anyone who's not walking or biking, but maybe using a wheelchair or an assistive device like a walker. So lots and lots of folks out there, and some of those folks think of themselves as walking, and that's fine too. But we use rolling to be a little more inclusive.
Thank you. I thought you were talking about rollerblading, and I was wildly excited that your mission statement had expanded,
Well,
but that is a much better.
Yeah.
I like that.
No, it's
All those
in the
scooters.
bucket. Yeah, as well as scooters and
came
skateboarding.
in.
Yeah, and those are all things that are actually becoming more popular as more things become electrified. People are out using scooters, and actually rollerblades are really making a comeback too.
Yeah.
So yeah, all different modes that need safe infrastructure. And so yeah, there are many Vermonters who are using these modes of transportation. It's important and critical to a lot of folks to be able to walk and bike safely and comfortably. And as our state ages and more Vermonters age out of their driving years, access to safe walking and biking and also transit is going to become more and more critical. And there was actually a recent pedestrian crash in Randolph that I think emphasizes the importance of this. There's still the crash investigation is still ongoing. So this is based on early reports, but it sounds like gentleman was walking in downtown Randolph near the Amtrak station. And there was a gap in the sidewalk network in front of a convenience store. And so he was having to walk along behind the cars that were parked in front of the store. And one of them backed out and hit him. And he sadly died. So it emphasizes that, as our population ages, we're very vulnerable even to these very low speed crashes, and small gaps like that in our walking and biking network can lead people in a really dangerous place. So it's a key component of our transportation network. It's also really linked to our housing goals, right? If we want to be able to build densely in that kind of traditional pattern that we all know and love in our, our great downtowns and village centers. Those places were largely built before we had the kind of car ownership rates that we do now. If we want to be able to build densely and affordably like that without having to build parking garages everywhere, we're going to have to also reduce our rates of car ownership and driving. So getting a little more specific and looking back at last session for a moment, there were a few changes to vulnerable user laws that were passed that local motion supported, and we're really happy to see those. So the kind of the headline as shown here is the safe passing law. We had a safe passing law in the books previously, but it was only a recommended 4-foot clearance between a car and a vulnerable user. Vulnerable user, of course, refers to basically anyone outside of a car. I don't know the part of it. And so we were very thankful that the legislature decided to strike the word recommended from that section of statute. And so now there's no required 4-foot passing distance. So that enables the use of the signage that's shown here to be posted on both state and town roads. And we've been working with some partners in towns to help them understand sort of guidance for where those should go. I understand the state is working on its own guidance for how those will get integrated into their projects. So it's very helpful from an education perspective to have those signs right there out on the road where people are doing the things that we're educating them about. And it also makes enforcement possible, although this is a challenging thing to enforce. But if there's a requirement, it's at least possible to do.
And I'm sure helpful with tourism too. I mean, there's a huge biking culture in our area for tourists, and I'm sure that it makes them feel safer to at least see that we're trying to enforce those to come and have this be a destination that they travel to.
Definitely. And I think, that tourism is really critical to our economy as we're seeing. And the state signaling to people who ride bikes that this is a place where you're welcome and where we take your safety seriously, I think is really important to supporting that recreational economy. So that was sort of the headline from last year. There were a few other vulnerable user laws that I won't get into, but I do want to get into some potential things to think about during this session. No cost, right? It's right there. So there are some other states and localities that are rethinking how bikes are regulated at intersections. This is to improve safety and also just to make biking easier, sort of align the laws with how people actually behave and what's intuitive and reasonable when you're on a bike. So VTrans just finished up a report that looks at these. It's on the website there. And these are really simple, no cost changes. And I look forward to speaking with you in more depth about these. I think these would be good things that can support biking and also possibly reduce some congestion. So I want to just emphasize again, kind of looping back to infrastructure. It's a big challenge for our municipalities to build out their networks. The grants that are available through the state have really been underfunded for a long time now. And it's having some consequences at the local level where planners are, for example, taking a project on a street and having to cut it up into multiple sections to get it funded, which just takes so much more of their staff capacity when they're having to go through permitting multiple times, having to go through grant applications multiple times. And it's really reducing the project quality and making things take a lot longer to deliver. The path shown here on Route 15 in Colchester, great example of a VTrans project that provided really good, safe infrastructure along the state highway. We really want to see more of that. We want to see that path connected on both ends to Winooski and Essex because it's just sort of floating there in the middle now. But these are really great projects, and we want to make sure that there's adequate resources devoted to them. And then just my last thing, the state's statewide e-bike incentive program was the first in the nation to be available across the state. So go us. It's a great program. It is targeted solely to low-income Vermonters to help them access an affordable means of electric transportation. So we see this really as essential to a just transition as we're funding, electric cars are obviously more expensive and not accessible to lower income people for the most part. E-bikes are really they fill that gap in allowing people to get into a really climate friendly and healthy and low cost way of getting around. And there's great incentives available from utilities in a lot of parts of the state, and the state's rebates really pairs well with those and makes these really affordable. So please maintain this program. And that's it. And that's us.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Thank you.
As far as reach out, to bikers, how do you go about getting the message out to bikers about some of the changes we've made and some of the rules of the road and stuff?
Yeah, well, there's multiple levels to it. And so media outreach is something that we did some work on when those changes were made, and there was some media coverage of those changes. We put out our own messaging on our social media via email and work with our partners. I know the VTrans put out some messages as well on their social media. There is definitely more to be done. And especially on this, the safe passing requirement, I think that the signs going out on the roads is far and away the best messaging technique, because they're going to be there, they'll stay there, and people will see them. Whereas, we can do media outreach, but WCX does a story and it's gone the next day.
Right. So that's a twofold question. On the shared use path that you showed in Colchester, we have quite a few of those out there. And one of the first ones actually runs right by me now. They have the little stop signs on every cross street. How would you, I know it's tough, but how would you outreach to folks to just, maybe it's a DMV thing. I mean, maybe they have to get involved too, but nobody stops at those stops. And it's gotten to the point where when I pull into my street, I let them go because I know they're not going to stop anyway. So so I'm educated now but another thing is, and this might have to work with DMV also. People are giving the 4 feet to bikers the majority of the time. I know I see it every day. We have to educate the drivers that it's not okay to pull into the other lane when there's a car coming. They do it all the time. They say, I'm giving this guy 4 feet, but I'm also ready to hit this guy head on. So that might be a driver's ed thing.
Yeah, and I know that the handbook was updated based on the laws that were passed last year. I actually saw the new draft of the handbook. There's a lot in that handbook, and it's just a couple sentences out of thousands.
It's been a long time since I read that.
We should do it.
I don't recommend it. Not a bestseller. But there are a couple ways of thinking about your question, and I think those path intersections that you bring up are really challenging, particularly when they are not traffic signal controlled.
Right.
And it's something that we've been dealing with on the Burlington bike path too. And Burlington has been thinking about, should these all have stop signs? Should they have yield signs? Should the cars have a stop sign? And that's obviously really dependent on the context and sight lines and a lot of different things. And part of what we're talking about with the intersections study and bikes at intersections that I mentioned a few slides back is actually thinking about, how do people on bikes actually behave at these intersections? And is that a safe thing to do? The data nationally seems to say that people on bikes making rolling stops is safe. And there's a lot that, sort of contributes to that. One is that as a person on a bike, when you're approaching a stop sign, you're typically going 10 miles an hour at most. It's not like in a car where you're coming in at 25 and then potentially, braking and then accelerating back up to 25 really fast. You have much more time as a person on a bike to look around, absorb your surroundings. You can hear more. And so there are some real differences in how people on bikes use the roadway and absorb information on the roadway. That doesn't really align with this idea of like same road, same rules that we've been talking about for a long time. So there's some, I think, benefit in reconsidering some of that. And yeah, I think, messaging to drivers, I think, especially as we consider more changes to how bikes are regulated and more changes to our road rules in general, there's a need for a real coordinated campaign. And that's something that report that I mentioned actually looks at, is how this education happens and who the players are that are involved. And we're at Local Motion totally here and looking forward to partnering with the state entities and others on that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Westman. I know that we have the late coming in at, I think, 9:45, if that's
Right.
still correct. So,
We're gonna run over now.
okay. So I just had two thoughts. Thank you very much for your presentations. It is such a delight to hear from the public transit folks and the bike folks. I feel like Senate transportation in particular has been like 90% car, 10% everybody else for the last however long we had a committee. And I think it's important that we actually talk about solutions for low income folks who are the primary users of all of these forms of transportation, rather than individual car owners. So I appreciate your presentation. I just had one question, which is when I was in elementary school, we did like a special teach you how to bike thing. And it was like a whole day. And it was very valuable because it taught kids who didn't have access to learning how to bike, like they didn't have a parental figure who was there to support them through learning that. And it also taught me that, I should wear bright colors and make sure that a rolling stop happens. And what does it mean when you're at an intersection and you make eye contact with the car owner? Like all of those skills that I don't think a parent necessarily would have passed down, like if they're not an educator. I'm wondering, do you still do those? Who funds those?
Yeah. So I love that you asked the question. So we have a program called Bike Smart. That is essentially it's a comprehensive education on bike safety. A lot of kids do learn how to ride through the program as well, but the key is to make kids learn how to ride safely. And so we have 3 trailers that have 50 kids' bikes each in them and all the equipment and curriculum. And they go out to schools typically for a week or 2 at a time. And generally PE teachers administer the program and teach kids how to use bikes safely. That program, just because of the way it's set up, it can only go to 40 or 50 schools in any given year. So just a fraction of the number of schools that we have. So we historically, Local Motion, have been involved with the state's Safe Routes to School program. We requested funding to continue that this year, and unfortunately did not get enough to continue and to administer a holistic Safe Routes to School program that would be available to more schools throughout the state. It's badly needed, and unfortunately, it's really a gap right now. So there's a definite need for funding there. We are doing our best to provide resources to schools so that they can continue to do some things on their own. But in order for us to support them meaningfully, we need some funding to do it.
Thank you. And perhaps we could talk about that.
I appreciate your comments. I will remind you that, and know it was before your time, and some of us are old, but
Or young at heart.
this committee, with the House Committee, led charges for things like the Loyal Valley Rail Trail and a number of the bike trails. And I was intricately involved in that. So I don't think the biking community has totally been missed over the last 20 years when we've completed the rail trail and a number of things. And I think the trail out through the islands, from Colchester out through the islands, I think now Governor Scott, who has been an avid biker, was very active with Senator Mazza to do that. So it may be a little different advocacy that's going on now, but the people weren't totally silent.
Oh, maybe I'll give you like 30-70 then for the cards. Or something. I like that.
Complete streets.
Complete.
Yeah.
And we can do more of that.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if they're involved in Complete Streets at all, or if you have any design process in here.
Yeah, so
It needs to be quick because
Oh,
we
yeah.
gotta do.
Sure. Yeah. So we provide technical assistance to towns throughout the state. So that's very
Good.
closely
Okay.
connected to the state's Complete Streets law. And we employ Complete Streets principles when we provide that assistance.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And also just to add that several members of the coalition are actively involved in the state standards update that will be helping to integrate more context sensitive street design and complete streets. I think will kind of be part and parcel of that evolution of street design in the next couple of years.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
David Livingston. He's my neighbor.
Yeah.
Area. Thank you all.
Thank you.
That is
You.
similar to the one.
Yeah, we have the Dolphin Brook path.
The what?
It's a Dolphin Brook bike path. Looks very similar.
Yeah. That 8 feet wide.
On the bike path.
Oh, say it
Or
again.
other dolphins on the bike path.
No, Dolphin. Dolphin. Oh,
Dolphin fin,
it's supposed to be like, there's a
like not a colorful fin, it's a dolphin.
VOTHAN.
Yes.
AN.
Dolphin.
Dolphin.
Oh, so it's a name of somebody.
Yeah, it's the elementary school I went to. I'm a DBSR.
We should
know
Come on. I'm a Hartford Hurricane. I'm a Dolphin.
So we are a little over and we do need to move on. So
I'm buying. Is this working? Great.
The budget. Oh, after this, okay.
if anytime you're ready.
That's speech. For the record, John Hanford, Director of Intergovernmental Relations at Vermont League of Cities and Towns.
Your name.
I'm Samantha Sheehan, the Municipal Policy and Advocacy Specialist from VLCT.
And our plan was to give a quick overview of VLCT.
Yep.
Some overall high priorities and then some transportation priorities. And then we did have two things that aren't on our slides I wanted to make sure we talked about before we left. So with that, VLCT serves every municipality in the state. All your towns are members. We provide workshops and training. We provide comprehensive insurance for municipalities. We provide legal advice and other assistance to municipalities, collect data and surveys to sort of inform our policies and help you understand some of the situations, and then participate in numerous work groups and studies to sort of help municipalities speak in one voice. And recently we've gotten into the business of technical assistance, providing financial and operational support, helping write grants, helping bring down federal funds. Sort of really started after the flooding, actually a little bit before, sort of ARPA money, actually. We've assisted every single municipality in the state with ARPA funding and making sure that the funding was obligated and the reports were submitted. And so that's becoming a big part of our work that communities seem to appreciate. We're currently operating on a USDA Rural Development grant to support that work. We hope to keep doing that in the future because it seems really needed in many of our smaller under-resourced communities, especially.
One of the Vermont projects that our colleagues in the municipal operations support team supported was the major transportation infrastructure project for South Burlington. They helped with the grant to bring in about $8 million to complete that funding stack. So transportation projects included are part of that new project.
So
Are you involved at all with the other municipal technical assistance program with the states?
NTAP,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Governor to announce more about it.
we are currently one of the three or four service providers in that fund. Not sure what the future is going to hold on that, but it seemed to be successful from our perspective. We seem to have a unique voice for municipality. Sure, regional planning support, council rural development does visioning, but there's a lot of in the weeds financial and technical questions that municipalities really need specific guidance and a uniform voice. Maybe regional planning commissions might have different priorities amongst the regions, and we really want to make sure municipalities get the same advice and legal guidance, consistent across the state.
It seemed like they would overlap well too.
Absolutely. Yes. So just a little background on how we arrive at our priorities and our policies. Every 2 years, we go through a big policy setting process. In the summertime, we have 5 different policy committees. Transportation is one of them, obviously. And we seek volunteers from municipalities across the state. Usually have about 10 or 12 folks that serve. We meet several times in person and then have discussions. And those create a set of municipal policies, which is about 20 pages long. And the VLCT board, all the members at our annual meeting vote on those policies. That happens in October. And then we sort of distill that down to our priorities from our policies. And what Samantha and I noticed when we were reviewing our policy theme, 2 themes sort of emerged. Municipalities are really looking for support and authorization to sort of meet the needs of a modern local government. We need some authority and some help to maintain these functions, provide these services, and then we want to take action together with you on these bigger challenges of the 21st century: housing, public safety, climate resiliency. And so that's where these themes sort of our priorities sort of emerge with the support and action. Here are the members from our transportation committee. You'll see some folks in there, certainly the chair, Chris Jolly from Lemoyle County, former Federal Highway Administration expert that served Vermont for decades. Also, Nick Zach is a former transportation expert as well, that's worked all around the country and is a fantastic resource. And then a variety of other community members representing a sort of broad swath of municipality types and regions across the state. So across the board, our transportation priorities here. Samantha, I can't read the
That's
small.
We didn't see them, but
Yeah. So the top one is not specific to transportation, although certainly transportation projects can be some of the most ambitious sort of project management endeavors of any municipality in Vermont. But we are asking sort of across the board that in a challenging budget year like this one, that the state do what it can to avoid cost shifting onto municipal budgets. So everybody's property tax bill that is a homeowner in Vermont, about 30% of the property tax they pay funds their local town government. And so when it comes to things like maintaining town highways, emergency repairs of public infrastructure, building resilient public infrastructure for the future, either we fund those in partnership with you or we fund them on our own, but either way it comes out of the property tax bill. We are asking again to adequately and sort of adequately fund and right size public transit services, which are vital in communities across the state now, and certainly for the vibrant and resilient future that we all want to have for Vermont. This is a particular priority for this year. So I will add that VLCT has very few appropriations asks in our list of priorities overall for this year. And the few that we are coming to you with are really important priorities. And one is to ensure that the funding for the Town Highway Emergency Fund is sufficient to cover municipal costs regardless of federal disaster declaration. We have a sort of partner request for a new emergency borrowing authority so that select boards or legislative bodies at the town level can borrow for up to 5 years for debt repayment in an all hazards event. And this is because of the very long, complex and extensive process for FEMA reimbursement, and towns just simply cannot wait. If a road culvert goes out and a neighborhood is stranded, the town has to get in there and rebuild it and access people's homes and allow them to access the rest of their community. And so they got to put the money up first and then wait for FEMA to come through a year or more later.
Some are still waiting.
Yeah.
And some are
So
still
we
waiting.
have a specific ask in other committees. We've mentioned it. the statute right now is pretty complicated and restrictive for municipalities to do emergency borrowing. And this is in conjunction with the bond bank. You know, this is good fiscal practice to have this authority. It's got conditions around it. There's a few other there about also having sort of unrestricted fund authority, which municipalities don't have either. It's the best practice in government accountability that we're not following because we're not authorizing our municipalities to do that. So this sort of speaks to some of those financial authorizations that we're asking for in some other committees, but it's related to this sort of work that we do in the transportation network mainly.
And some municipalities in Vermont do have through their own charter, the authority for an unassigned fund balance. The easiest way to think about this is your paycheck goes into your checking account, you spend it down, and then whatever money is left at the end of the week, you leave in there and you get your next paycheck. Well, municipalities aren't allowed to do that. They have to obligate whatever that leftover money is after they spend down their town budget. It is just the normal fundamental best practice that they be allowed to keep that money available for grant matching, future emergency needs and other opportunities and expenses that may arise in the future.
And over half of the municipalities don't have a charter.
Yeah.
So, and the charter cannot universally include this, and some of the larger communities have a little bit more authority, but.
Interesting. We support the state and share the state's climate goals, especially around the electrification of vehicles and homes. However, we're asking you to mindfully diversify the transportation fund revenue sources in a way that aligns with those goals and the future adoption of even more electric vehicles without sort of shortchanging towns and the work that they do maintaining local infrastructure for all users, including vehicles. We are asking that one way to do this that we think is fair and creative is to remit a portion of registration fees to the municipality in which the vehicle is registered. That is where the car spends the most of its time and then puts the most wear and tear on the local infrastructure. And this would allow even the smallest towns like mine. We have less than 300 people, but probably more than 600 vehicles, if I had to guess. I've got 4 at my house, not including the 2-wheeled vehicles. That, you know, that would go a long way in allowing municipalities to begin to build a capital budget and a capital plan for their roads, local roads, and road maintenance, you know. And lastly, these are our top priorities. We have another slide with other policies which we support, but the last priority is to help us in building resilient infrastructure that is designed for its intended use. So to be even more specific, we need, when we repair and replace bridges, they need to be rated for modern vehicles and for transit in order to sort of transit ready rural Vermont. We need to make sure that the, you know, GMP truck can get to every house in the community. And this is a real challenge right now in communities across the state.
Yeah, I'd just add to that, you know, what we heard loud and clear for those folks on our transportation committee is they feel like their local transportation infrastructure is not meeting this.
Yes.
The bridges are not rated properly for the fuel truck to deliver, the snow plow, or the public transit vehicle to go over them. And that's sort of like a fundamental, the systems need to be safe in order for the other users to bring these other benefits and other priorities we're seeking across the state. They need to be safe. And the mud season's lasting longer, the wear and tear. Just think about how many Amazon deliveries are happening on back roads now that didn't happen before. There's heavier, more frequent vehicles, and the public are expecting safer, more modern roads, and the system and the funding is just not keeping up.
Even Airbnb guests are really if that happens. That's happening in my town.
Yeah.
The really nice house at the top of the hill with great views is an Airbnb now that's multiplying daily traffic.
So first question, the being able to borrow after an emergency, that you guys have language.
We do.
Yeah.
If you could show us some language and bring that in. we would take a look and we probably have more questions. Are you hearing from your members about the backup need in transportation projects? But I'll give you, was sick earlier this week and the agency comes in and talks about the structures program and talks about class 2 roadway. And they indicated the week before that construction projects for the agency had gone up 40%, but there's no more demand for those 2 programs, which are grant programs. So it really is hard for us to measure need when no one seems to be collecting information on the need for the communities. You are a central point for municipalities. And I would think that would be an issue for you.
I have 2 immediate responses. One, I'm going to go back to our first slide. A critical part of the work that the municipal operations team is doing is building project readiness capacity. So oftentimes to go even to a state program to access grant funds, a lot of work needs to have happened first. And in small communities, you're relying on a volunteer road commissioner and a part-time town clerk to get that project together. So these technical service programs like MTAP and like the municipal operations support team is one way to help that pipeline. Another is that anecdotally, I think a lot of 2 things that affect that pipeline as well. One is the kind of lack of capital funding that can build up and a municipality can see what projects are achievable for them on the horizon. The other is the flood response. That's derailing a lot of wanted and needed maintenance.
And I would reject that's really the case, that there aren't projects in Senate Transportation yesterday. One of the members challenged that exact question, saying, well, no, my town's received a project a few years ago. They said it's going to be another 10 years. Yeah. We have plenty of projects, plenty of repairs we're trying to do, but we just know that we're not in line for.
I would just say to you that unless you can create a need and you can create something for us to talk about on that need, it becomes very hard to advocate for you. And so as we look at that, I would hope that along with the agency, that the league would begin to think about how we can define what the issues are around that. I have a sneaky suspicion that it's a greater issue for the towns than many people might think.
I bet you we could get the Stowe Public Works Director to come in here and give you a scary list of bridges that people shouldn't be driving over, and they don't have the funding to fix it.
I think that Andy had his hand up, and so if we can
go. Town Highway Emergency Fund, do you think it's sustainably funded now or adequate or sufficiently funded? The way it was proposed this year?
Yeah, our members on this committee feel that it is underfunded and needs to be plussed up, because I don't have a dollar amount, but we can get that a little bit more clear too.
There's no Chittenden County representation here today. So in the 2024.
That's true.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. In the 2024 flood quickly, for the first few days, it was looking like Chittenden County may not receive disaster declaration until, at the time I worked in the Burlington Mayor's office, until about 48 hours later, when a major wastewater pipe was torn open under the Winooski River, and that was enough to push the county over. But in the short term, it was, we were talking with the RPCs who were speaking with other governments, and like Richmond really had a rough go, and some other neighborhoods in other parts of central Chittenden County who may have been left on the hook without FEMA or without a presidential declaration because the whole county was falling under that fiscal.
Right, now I
limit.
understand the need,
Yeah.
but you would ask that it be funded sufficiently,
Yeah.
so I'm
Yeah.
assuming you thought that it wasn't. But I
We
don't
don't,
have a number.
we don't, but I don't know what that exact amount it should be funded to. I think that's up for debate, but the fund has run, low in the past and with more frequent emergencies that are not going to maybe reach the FEMA declaration level.
They're proposing just over $1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And back to the point, Chair, the last bullet on here, what we heard a lot from our members is the reason you're not seeing the need is the state's not tracking it in a consistent way. They're not tracking the paving that's needed. There's no inventory to show how far behind we are. And that could be said in a number of ways. And so each individual town to assess it in a different way and roll it up and make the case, that's not a consistent way of evaluating. One of the other themes we left off here is to actually, in VTrans building their budget, consult the municipalities of what you need and us, which frankly doesn't happen. I think you could see from the reaction of seeing that the town highway funding in the governor's recommend having a 6% overall down, structured down 11-13% is just not something that we're feeling is a good way forward. We depend, it's one of the most basic things taxpayers depend on is the roads to be safe, things to be passable, and to see a core infrastructure being funding being reduced. When we're talking about other added on benefits of transportation, the bike pen, I enjoy all these other complete street activities and really value those, but we can't let the basics slip this far and expect that we're going to be able to deliver those other add-ons with a declining transportation fund and really uncertainty around how we're going to make up for that. The talk of, the vehicle miles traveled is the way. Well, we would argue for a lot of our members that live in very rural parts of the state that they do travel a lot more miles. They have to. And if they're paying into a fund, those projects are in places they don't drive. They're paying for funds in more urban areas for transportation projects. Driving rural roads, they get hardly any support. And so that's not a very equitable way. And a declining revenue will result from the behavior changes of those very drivers as well. So that's not a sustainable way in the future either to support transportation.
Most of your projects that cost the biggest money go where there are high traffic counts.
Right.
And what you're talking about is, what I will say to you is, from a legislature that sits here for 4.5 months a year and is part-time and not dealing with this all year long, and the proposals are very encouraged.
Slides. Just a quick question, on the first slide, you had public fund right-sized efficient public transit.
Mhm.
So do you have an idea of what right-sized and efficient is? And do you have an idea of a specific source or multiple sources?
Yeah, for example, it's meant to cover, when you replace the culvert, shouldn't be reinstalled for a Q25 storm.
No. I mean,
Oh,
I
sorry.
agree
Yeah,
with
yeah.
that too, and
Yeah.
I would hope that we had already been.
Some of the funding
fire
is
trucks
not
are the
for
heaviest
an
thing,
upgrade
so-
of sufficient
Yeah.
to deal with
So
it.
that's totally an
Yeah.
issue, and I agree, but on transit, I just want to know if you have a specific proposal or an idea, because there are multiple funding sources that have been.
What this is trying to get at is expecting that a municipality is going to kick in a share universally across the state for public transit that is not uniformly available and not serving the members when their budgets are reducing how much gravel and how much grading is non-sustainable. It should be a statewide process to do this, not depending on each individual community to see the value in supporting that public transit provider at $100,000 for this size town or 40. It's kind of a haphazard,
Oh.
competitive process, and we're saying that's not working.
It's an asking
Yeah.
process. It's a begging
Yeah,
process, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so you're saying find another way.
Fund another way.
Okay, so that's a good clarification.
Yeah.
And if you have suggestions, it would be
Yeah.
helpful.
This is an issue that obviously a number of towns don't have the same access to that transit. So it's not a universally,
Well, just for the record, every town has some form of transit because of the Medicaid services and Medicare services. So transit does exist everywhere. And it's especially healthcare. So every resident has access to some form of transit. I just want that to be on record.
So we do have over 300 people that are out there as,
The
quasi,
volunteer drivers.
quasi volunteer
No.
drivers out there
Right.
designed to help people get to medical things. Did you have?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had 2 points, which was just to build off what the chair was saying. We don't know, other than anecdotal information, the quality of our local roads at this point.
Mhm.
And the state has essentially said, I think their position is, we don't want to track that.
Mm.
So it's less, I love that you're saying that we should establish state tracking. I would happily move legislation to do that. I don't necessarily think you have the buy-in right now to get that passed by the governor, if that's my understanding. So we're going to need data to make the case. And it seems like the league would be a really great place to start with that. So just putting that out there, if you have any data that shows the quality of local roads over time, even if it's from some of the larger cities, that would be really helpful. And that's a personal ask of mine.
Some of the larger cities do have those year-over-year reports for
Yeah.
city maintained mileage.
Anything you have would be helpful.
Yeah,
But I do have one.
it's a much more of a struggle on that.
small,
Yeah.
part-time.
Like that's what we're meeting.
If the state would establish that as a follow, how should we, what would we put in for language that would instruct them to do that?
Oh, no, it's great. So you're talking, your solution to get, so I'm surprised your solution for funding local roads is to remit the registration fee. Unexpected, creative, love it. But I thought we should just finagle with the town highway aid percentages. So why this over that?
It's a bigger theme of revenue sharing. We're surrounded by states that have revenue sharing programs directly with municipalities in the transportation space and a whole bunch of other spaces where instead of competing, having a budget set by a state agency, the aid is directly going to where it's going to be used by those users and it can be counted on. It's something we're severely lacking in Vermont, and we're at the whims of whatever the AOT in this case decides or what data they're using. And it's not really setting up for a sustainable way to manage. And so this is just one small way. And in some towns, it won't be a ton of money.
Yeah,
But
that's my.
it is something you could plan for at least. You could budget because roughly the number of vehicles in your community isn't going to change from year, might grow. And that's not the case now with the budgeting process.
I would look for grant match funds.
Yeah.
Like even in the micro towns, if they were able to build up $50,000 in a 3-year period that they knew was coming through revenue sharing, then that would be something they could plan to be competitive with and work on project readiness for. Yeah.
It's interesting. I would love to hear more, and if you have comparisons between states that do this and don't.
Hampshire does
I
this.
see pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
So.
This is a significant source of revenue from municipal roads in New Hampshire. Their registration process is different and higher. It's based on the value of the vehicle, which is something that,
Which is way higher.
Mhm.
We're not talking little higher. We're talking
Well,
way.
because they don't have sales tax, so it's built into
Right.
that.
They
That's
do have
big.
taxes.
You tried to get us to switch to an ad
Yeah.
valorem.
I've
Yeah.
heard this word
Yeah.
before, but I don't want to know anymore.
Yes.
But there's models in between. Yeah, where there's classes of vehicle that have different differentials in the registration fees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one place, so we don't forget, there is a bill that we would like this committee to take up, S4.
Oh,
From Senator Clarkson, and I think you're a sponsor, and maybe the whole Wyndham County delegation.
I don't remember.
All
Windsor did. I don't know if you guys done public. Right.
Windsor, I'm sorry.
Don't worry.
So legal trails, that's a transportation issue. There's currently a court case in Tunbridge. Many communities that have lots of outdoor recreation, Wilmot County certainly is, I think, the highest per capita trails and outdoor recreation. Should pay attention to this, and this bill is a very quick, easy solution to the problem. And we definitely, the league supports, of course, Tunbridge is our member, and we're supporting them in this lawsuit. And if this doesn't go our way, we'll have a ramification with lots of legal trails across the state that we have put money into, frankly, transportation money, outdoor recreation money. And so we definitely would encourage you to hear about that bill.
Perhaps we could ask if they have witnesses they might recommend for the bill. If you do, that would be helpful. I don't know if we want to invite Tunbridge themselves, just because
That might be
of
a
that
challenge
court case,
because of the
but
active
if
case.
there are
Yeah.
alternative municipalities, that would be-
I bet you we could easily do that.
yeah, that might be a good,
Interstate road.
Maybe Stowe again.
John Ryan, we get John.
I have some. I know, too.
At this point, thank you.
Thank you.
And we're gonna take 5 minutes before we, and I'd like to keep it 5